I spotted my sister the moment she cleared customs, though spotted isn't the right word. Elena didn't walk so much as drift eyes, unfixed skin sallow under the airport fluorescence. A hard-shell suitcase I'd never seen scraped behind her like an anchor. When she fell into my arms, her shirt was damp and her body trembled as if the terminal's air conditioning had teeth. "Elena," I said, "are you sick?" "I'm fine," she whispered, not looking at me. Her gaze kept snagging on uniforms, TSA Blues Airport Police, a janitor's reflective vest as if that too counted as authority. Every time a badge passed, her shoulders jerked. She smelled faintly of jet fuel and something sharper underneath a sterile note that didn't belong to airplanes. I reached for the suitcase handle out of habit. She snapped it back so fast the wheels lifted off the tile. "Don't touch it," she said, a quiet blade. It wasn't like her. Elena, who once asked me to carry her purse to the restroom because the strap rubbed her shoulder, now guarding a bag like a secret. I tried humor. "Since when are you this territorial moss?" Since now, she muttered, thumbs flying over her phone screen. In the reflection of the glossy case, I caught a flash of the caller list, Damien 50 missed calls. Damien Ward, the boyfriend from her month in Colombia, the one who sent expensive coffee beans and poetry about constellations, the one I'd never met and already disliked. "Where's Damien?" I asked. "Work," she said. He had to fly out. Her mouth twitched an almost smile that died before it reached her eyes. "Can we just get to the car?" We moved through the concourse, threading families and carry-ons like obstacles in a maze. Elena walked too fast, then too slow, then too fast again, a metronome breaking time. The suitcase bumped her heel. She winced but wouldn't let me help. An overhead announcement asked passengers to report unattended baggage. Elena's grip tightened. She steered us along the windows, keeping space between her and the security rovers that purred up and down the hall. At a restroom sign, she stopped so abruptly a businessman nearly collided with us. "I need a minute," she said, breath shallow. "Watch the bag. Don't let anyone near it." "Since when do I moonlight as a bodyguard?" "Harper." My name clipped urgent. "Please." She vanished into the women's room. I stood with the suitcase and tried not to stare at it. The case was a brushed metal silver, the kind advertisers pair with words like executive and elite. Close up, I noticed gouges around the latch as if someone had pried it open with a tool and then smoothed the edges with polish. That sterile smell rose again, chemical sharp, not quite bleach, not quite adhesive. It stung the back of my throat. A K-9 unit rounded this corner, a golden shepherd at heel handler in dark uniform. The dog's head came up before its paws changed rhythm. It pulled sideways, nose lifting, a soft whine building in its chest. The handler murmured a correction and kept moving, but his eyes tracked the case and his hand drifted to the radio clipped at his shoulder. My heart knocked. It's an airport, I told myself. Dogs are trained to react to everything from old gum to stale guilt. But the air felt different, thinner, heavier, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Elena reappeared, mascara blurred knuckles white around a wad of paper towel. She seized the handle and started for the exit at a near jog. "Elena," I said, falling in beside her, "talk to me." "He loves me," she said. She said it again softer, as if the statement needed rehearsal. "He loves me. This is all. It's going to be fine." "Did he give you that suitcase?" I asked. Her jaw worked. Mine broke. "And he packed this for you?" A flinch. It was a gift. We reached a corridor where two officers stood watching the flow of people with the bored focus of lifeguards. One of them raised a hand directing a couple with backpacks to step aside for a random screening. Elena stopped. Her breath hitched audibly as if the air had turned to gravel. "Harper," she whispered, eyes fixed on the officer's hands. "If anyone asks, I don't know what's in the bag." My skin went cold. "What did Damien tell you?" "That it's nothing," she said, voice shredding. "That I should act surprised. That they can't prove what you don't know." The noise of the terminal receded. The rolling carts, the chatter, the landings, until I could hear only the slick squeak of that case's wheels and my own blood in my ears. The chemical tang had a weight now, a wrongness that made instinct bristle. "Listen to me," I said low. "We can fix mistakes. We can't fix prison." "Don't," she said. "Please don't say that word." Movement rippled at the edge of my vision. The K-9 unit had circled back. The dog's ears were forward, its body quivered with purpose, its leash shortened. Elena pivoted to retreat, but behind us a pair of officers had appeared, drifting into position with the casual choreography of people who did this every day. The crowd veered around us the way a river splits around a rock. Space opened unnatural, a circle of too much room. A recorded voice chimed from the ceiling: "For your safety, please comply with all instructions from airport personnel." I realized I could no longer hear our footsteps. "Elena," I said, "put the bag down." She shook her head, a tiny, violent motion. "He promised." The words broke. He said this trip would set us up, that her phone lit. The contact photo of Damien vanished as the screen flashed "number blocked." A sob escaped her, small and raw, like something that had been waiting since Wheels Up. The dog surged, barking now, the sound ricocheting off glass and steel. Officers moved as if pulled by the noise. One of them spoke into his mic. Another held his palm out in a calming gesture that wasn't calming at all. "I'm going to take your hand," I told Elena, keeping my voice even. "We're going to breathe. We're going to—" "Hands where I can see them," someone shouted, not at us, not only at us, but it filled my head. Passengers melted backward, phones rising like a field of periscopes. Harper, Elena said so softly I almost missed it. I think I knew, and I wanted him to love me anyway. I squeezed her fingers. "We're together," I said. "Whatever comes next, we're together." The suitcase thumped against the tile as she finally let go. The dog lunged, teeth-bared, barking, shattering into a dozen echoes. Command voices layered: "Step back on your knees. Don't move," until language blurred into force. I lowered myself, palms open, knees biting the cold floor. Elena's legs folded beside me, her breath ragged against the noise. The hard shell of the case sat between us like a third person, mute and gleaming under the terminal lights. Metal touched my wrists, cold, precise, before I registered the click. Above the cuffs and the shouting and the dog and the lights, I heard a strange quiet inside my own head, the sound of something ending and something else, terrible, necessary, beginning. They separated us the second the cuffs clicked. An officer guided me left, while Elena sagged to the right, the silver case parked like a landmine between us. I kept calling her name and hearing only the terminal's false cheerboarding calls, coffee promos, the rhythmic bark of the K-9 swallowing everything else. Processing blurred into a bureaucratic funnel. Bright lights, a camera that flashed without sympathy, a plastic chair that bit into the backs of my legs. An officer read a script I knew he could recite in his sleep. He wasn't cruel. He was tired. When I said I was only there to pick up my sister, he nodded as if he'd heard that exact sentence 100 times this month. A woman with a badge on a lanyard introduced herself as Agent Rosanna Cobb. She had the calm of someone who keeps her pulse low for a living. "You're not under arrest," she said, voice even. "But until we understand the scope, we need you here." Scope of what I asked, though. The answer was sitting 20 yards away behind glass, while a tech in gloves opened a suitcase I could no longer pretend was harmless. Agent Cobb didn't answer right away. She let me hear the rip of tape, the snap of plastic. "You have the right to an attorney," she said at last. I called Alistair Grove because his website looked like he'd fought this fight before. No grandstanding, just bullet points and a phone number that got answered. He arrived in a suit with travel creases, took notes with a fountain pen that gleamed like something inherited, and parked himself between me and every question I didn't have to answer. News moved fast. Decisions moved faster. By the time we reached our first hearing the next morning, Elena wore county orange. The magistrate peered over glasses, while the prosecutor used phrases that rang like steel quantity trafficking international route. Alistair spoke about no record, about coercion, about context, and the judge cut him off with a raised palm. Detained pending review. The gavel was a formality, chains weren't. I walked out into a sky the color of copier paper, and stood there blinking because the world had the indecency to look normal. The phone rang that afternoon. Harper, a woman asked. "Safia Zamora. I run a victim support organization." Mr. Grove reached out. Her voice carried a particular warmth, one practiced with people who don't yet believe they deserve it. She laid out a pattern I didn't want to see: whirlwind romance, isolation from friends, financial control, a gift suitcase. "They pick someone who will apologize for the harm done to her," Safia said gently. "Then they let the law do the rest." That night, I opened Elena's old laptop and sifted through cloud backups until the past began to populate on my screen. Messages clocked months earlier. He misses me when I go out. Is jealousy a love language? Photos of fancy coffee and his hand on her wrist. A plane ticket she hadn't paid for. A lease she'd given up. A job she'd press paused on because what if this trip is the start of everything? I scrolled until my eyes burned and the cursor shook from the tremor in my hand. Agent Cobb came by the next morning with a sealed evidence bag and that same controlled voice. We recovered Elena's phone. If he's still using his number, we may be able to draw him out. We sat at my kitchen table with legal pads and the kind of silence that sharpens thought. She suggested a message from Elena's account that would feel both needy and credible, nothing that sounded like law enforcement wrote it. We settled on 3 lines that had the ache of late night. I'm scared. Please pick up. Tell me what to do. We sent it on every platform he'd ever used. The little seen eye appeared on one app and stayed there like a dare. Agent Cobb dialed the number on speaker. 4 rings. A voicemail greeting that tried to sound casual and succeeded at sounding false. She left a message Elena could have left, hiccuping breath, a plea, a promise to be loyal if only he'd answer. When she hung up, she recorded everything twice. Even a lack of response is data, she said. A week later, the airport footage arrived. Alistair and I watched a pixelated Damien glide through check-in like a man who believed the world made room for him. He handled a silver suitcase identical to Elena's, smoothed the edges of the zipper, then passed it to her with a touch to her shoulder that read tender on camera and calculating in hindsight. A forensic tech zoomed matched scratch patterns on the latch to the one now in a federal locker and wrote a sentence that made my stomach flip high, probability of identical object. Credit card statements followed. Not hers, his. Hotel, meals, a pharmacy receipt for tampons, new clothes from a boutique that looked designed for women who post unboxings. He'd paid for almost everything while in Colombia, not generosity, but leash. The forensic accountant's memo used drier language, financial dependence consistent with coercive control. I saw Elena again in a room divided by glass and the kind of phone you clean instinctively before you touch. She looked washed out, but not broken eyes sliding to the door each time footsteps passed outside. They say I can't get bail, she whispered. They say I'm a risk. You're not a risk, I said. You're a person who was used. She shook her head, then nodded as if trying both answers to see which hurt less. He said this was our chance. She whispered the words, fraying. He said he had work in Miami, and then... She stopped swallowing. When the gate closed, I realized if anything went wrong, I'd be the only one on the wrong side of it. That night, a text came to my phone from an unfamiliar number. Stop talking to the feds if you like your job. The message included my building's name and the make and color of my car. I forwarded it to Agent Cobb and was in her office 20 minutes later, hands shaking so hard I could barely sign the report. She looped in local police to swing by my apartment and my office garage. She told me to vary my routes. She did not tell me it would be okay, only that I wasn't alone. A few days after the prosecutor, a trim woman with a posture that read marathoner, and mornings asked for a meeting. AUSA Yvette Pearson listened, while Alistair laid out what we had: the messages, the footage, the financials. It's not nothing, she said, tapping a pen against a legal pad. But if we can't show she didn't know, I still have to charge the weight. Offer cooperation, Alistair said softly. Let her earn her way down. Pearson considered. If she can give us names, locations, a pattern, something we can act on, then we can discuss a plea to a lesser count with a recommendation. Act on! The words lifted and hovered like a fragile balloon. The DEA techs did their own digging. They mapped Damien's travel and found the geometry. You can't pretend away 6 trips on the same path in the last year, 6 different women outbound with him and inbound alone. Flight manifests lined up like tiles. The names changed, the outline didn't. Predators love templates, Safia told me when I called throat tight with both dread and relief. It means they don't have to be creative to be effective. Agent Cobb proposed a bait post. We logged into Elena's account from a monitored device in a room that smelled like coffee and copier ink. I posted a photo of the two of them from before Colombia, Elena laughing at something out of frame while Damien half smiled at the camera like he enjoyed being observed. The caption read, "Haven't heard from you. Please call. I'm scared." Within hours, a new account DM'd friend of D can arrange a talk. It came with a time and a coffee shop address downtown. I volunteered because it never felt like a real choice. They wired me in a back office that looked like a storage closet for expensive radios, threading a thin mic along the curve of my bra and taping a transmitter flat against my skin. The agent doing the taping asked if I was all right, and I said yes, which was not the same thing as true. We staged the coffee shop like a play. 2 agents near the window, one outside pretending to study a bus map, one in line arguing with the pastry case. I ordered a drink I didn't want and watched the door. A young man walked up, peered in, scanned with the attention of someone who knows what a tail looks like, and pivoted away so fast his reflection streaked. The outside agent moved. The bus schedule flapped. By the time anyone hit the sidewalk, the stranger had vanished into the subway's open mouth. Burned Agent Cobb said later, eyes on the footage. Either he recognized one of us or he smelled the situation. They get training too. If hope is a muscle, mine cramped. Then 2 weeks later, it flexed again and arrest at the same airport a woman with an identical silver suitcase, a boyfriend with a different name but the same face once the agents showed her photos. She told a story close enough to ours to feel plagiarized. That's how you know you're not imagining the pattern. You can watch someone else recite it. The second woman's account filled gaps we'd been finger tracing in the dark. The introduction at a bar with overloud music. The sudden excellence of attention rides dinners, a promise that the world would finally make sense. The way he made independence sound like rudeness. The suitcase handed over with a grin. Yours broke. I fixed it. The script always leaves room for improvisation. Different bars, different jokes, but the beats don't change because the beats work. IOSA Pearson called Alistair the next morning, a shift in tone I could hear even through the second-hand report. We're getting closer to an offer, he told me, rolling his pen between fingers. But they'll want more. He's slippery. The stronger the pattern, the stronger the leverage. Elena's voice on the jail phone cracked. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I said. I hate the person who made you a tool. She pressed her forehead to the glass like a pilgrim to a relic. He's still out there. He won't be forever, I said, and didn't add the part where sometimes forever is longer than a case file's lifespan. Agent Cobb started talking about building a lattice evidence that could hold weight from multiple angles: digital, financial, eyewitness, physical. The arrest of the second woman gave us a strut. The footage gave us another. We were still missing the beam that would let a prosecutor step across without fear of falling. At home, I sorted Elena's mail into stacks labeled with sticky notes. Bills, school alumni flyers, the kind of coupons you get when an algorithm imagines you happy. I tried to work my day job from the island counter emails, answered between calls to Alistair, a spreadsheet completed between texts to Safia. HR left me a voicemail about leave policies that made professional sense and personal nonsense. I saved the message and didn't return the call. Safia met me for tea in a strip mall cafe where the tables wobbled no matter how many napkins you folded under the feet. She didn't try to fix the problem, she outlined the next 2 problems and how to survive them. You're going to be angry that the system makes you negotiate for mercy, she said, and you're going to grieve that even mercy isn't free. Both are normal. On my way home, the same unknown number texted again. Last warning. I sent a screenshot to Agent Cobb and drove 3 extra blocks past my building, looped twice, checked mirrors, the way you do when your world has shrunk to a cone of fear pointed backward. That night, I wrote down every step between the terminal and this moment on a yellow pad, because linearity was the only spell I had against chaos. Meet Elena. Smell chemical. Dog reacts. Cuffs. Agent. Lawyer. Judge. Safia. Laptop. Footage. Cards. Threats. Coffee shop. Second woman. Seeing it lined up didn't make it smaller, but it made it graspable, like a rope you can hold while crossing a river you don't trust. When I slept, I dreamed about the suitcase, but in the dream, it was empty, gleaming, and still somehow heavier than the version packed with bricks. In the morning, I woke to light that didn't hurt, and a voicemail from Alistair call me. Something new. I stood by the window with the phone against my ear, watching people walk their dogs and drink their coffees, and move through a sequence of choices that would not end in a metal door closing. What is it, I asked when he picked up. A development that supports our coercion theory, he said. We'll go over it with Pearson this afternoon. I looked out at the city and thought about scaffolding, how it obscures what a building will become until suddenly it doesn't. We were still in the part where the metal bars clanged and the net creaked and you trusted gravity would make sense again. We were not out. But the path forward had edges now, and edges, if you follow them long enough, make a shape. Alistair didn't sound like a man who celebrated often, which is why the quiet lift in his voice made my grip tighten on the phone. "We've got something," he said. "Meet me at Pearson's office at 3. By the time I cleared security at the Federal Building, the afternoon sun had turned the lobby's glass into a pale furnace. Alistair was waiting outside the elevator with a folder thick enough to bruise. AUSA Yvette Pearson ushered us in with a nod, legal pads already aligned like tiles on her desk. Agent Rosanna Cobb stood by the window, arms folded, the hint of a smile flattening as business began. "The lab report on the suitcase lock," Pearson said, tapping a page. "Multiple latent prints, Elena's yes, but also 3 distinct sets that do not match her. 2 of those are already in a federal database from prior narcotic seizures. The 3rd is unknown." A current ran up my spine. "So you can prove other people handled it before she ever did?" "We can argue it," Pearson said. "And it changes leverage." Agent Cobb slid a photo across the desk, a blown-up frame from airport footage. Damien smoothing the latch, the same scratch along the chrome edge, the same pattern of wear like a fingerprint the suitcase had chosen for itself. "We're not done," she added. "But this helps the story. We need a judge to hear." Alistair opened his folder. "We've also arranged for a forensic psychologist to evaluate Elena for trauma bonding and coercive control. That report will land on your desk within a week." Pearson's posture eased by degrees. "Good. If she's cooperating, I'm prepared to draft a plea to a lesser count, contingent on full truthful information about the operation." Outside traffic stitched the afternoon together. Inside, something like air returned to my lungs. The psychologist, Dr. Layla Mercer, met Elena in a small room that had been painted some soothing color a long time ago and then surrendered to fluorescent fatigue. Over 3 sessions, Elena spoke in fits and starts, stopping to brace against old reflexes. Defend him, excuse him, apologize for doubting him. Dr. Mercer didn't rush the pauses. When the report came, it read like a translation of a language I'd been hearing for months. Findings: classic sequence love bombing, social isolation, financial dependence, intermittent reinforcement, implicit threats of abandonment, explicit threats of harm, introduction of criminal risk disguised as help or gift. "Textbook isn't less real," Safia said when I called her later, relief cutting into my voice like light. "Sometimes people need to hear that their pain has a name." At the detention review, the magistrate refused bail, no surprise, but approved transfer to a facility with a real mental health program. When we visited the new place, it looked almost like a community college with reinforced doors. Elena's shoulders dropped an inch the moment she walked in. Windows that opened to trees. A notice board with group therapy times written in looping purple marker. For the first time since the terminal, her hands were still when they weren't holding something. We brought a legal pad at Alistair's suggestion and sat at a laminate table in a visiting room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. "Write what happened," I said. "Not what you wish happened. Not what you think they want to hear." The first draft apologized to Damien 12 times and accused him of nothing. The second burned hot anger as armor but still bent itself into rationalizing his choices. The third was different. Elena wrote in small, careful letters. "He lied about the bag. He told me to act surprised. He said love meant doing things without asking questions. I believed him until the dog barked. I am done believing him." She signed her name without shaking. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the margin and smudged the ink. 2 mornings later, I found a tiny key tucked into a velvet pouch in Elena's makeup bag, one of those delicate stamped metal things designed for a padlock no bigger than your thumb. I took a photo and texted it to Agent Cobb with a note. "Does this mean anything?" It meant everything. Within hours, we were driving to a cheap concrete labyrinth off the Interstate Heirloom Self-Storage, a place whose sign had lost its H. Cobb had already pulled the rental records attached to a dummy name that traced back to one of Damien's known aliases. A magistrate had signed a warrant. Another team met us there. The unit door rolled up with a corrugated sigh, and the breath left my body in a sound I didn't recognize as mine. Stacked silver suitcases the same, make the same scuffs, and shine lined the walls like trophies. On a folding table, vacuum sealers, digital scales rolls of plastic wrap tape, utility knives. Shelves held folders with color-coded tabs, photocopied passports, itineraries, printed boarding passes for women whose names already lived somewhere in my notes. The chemical smell that had clung to Elena's case lived here in concentrated form, harsh and literal. An agent cataloged in efficient murmurs. Another took photos angled to capture labels, serial numbers, the particular nick on a hinge. Cobb picked up one of the folders and flipped through. "There's your lattice," she said quietly to me. "Digital physical paper trail. It can carry weight now." I had to step outside. The corridor was cooler than air had a right to be. A grasshopper sat on the concrete threshold looking like a shard of green glass. I thought of Elena's third draft, how the letters steadied at the end. By the time we met Pearson again, the storage unit inventory lay in a binder with the orderly gravity of a family Bible. "This is the beam we were missing," she said, tapping the section with flight itineraries. "I'm drafting the cooperation agreement this afternoon." She didn't promise rainbows. She didn't have to. The room already felt tilted toward a future. Cooperation meant a proffer, the strange ceremony where you tell the government everything you've held in your chest while a court reporter translates your pauses into punctuation. We sat at another long table, Pearson, an agent from Cobb's team, me, Alistair, and Elena, in a pale sweater the facility allowed under her jumpsuit. Pearson read a statement about truthfulness and consequences, then nodded. "Start at the beginning." For 6 hours, Elena walked the prosecutors through the architecture of a trap. The coffee shop where Damien had asked what book she was reading and actually listened. The quick shift from interested to essential. The slow pruning of friendships until solitude looked like peace. The trip he paid for because we shouldn't keep score. The day he bought her clothes in Bogota so she could travel light and leave her old things at the hotel. The way he handled the suitcase like it was a living thing and she was the glass it sat behind. She wept twice and kept going. Pearson didn't coddle, she didn't cut. She asked for details, street names, dates, names of bars where introductions were made. Elena remembered more than she thought she would. Trauma doesn't erase, it reorders. With prompting, it unrolled. When we left, Elena looked emptied out in a way that wasn't collapse. It was clearing. Like a room after movers have gone and you can see the corners again. Pearson called 2 days later. "Draft agreement attached," she said. 12 pages, restrictions, requirements, the government's promise to recommend a downward departure if Elena kept her end. Alistair printed it, annotated the margins with a highlighter, and said, "This is the best path through." We signed. News about Damien's aliases arrived like a late storm. Cobb traced 3 of them through car rentals and short sublet leases, one of which pinged against a Texas case involving a woman stopped at the border with a suitcase and a story that rhymed with ours. The name of her boyfriend didn't match, but his face did once she saw a photo. Federal resources expanded, another office joined, the web widened. Meanwhile, a recruiter connected to Damien's network was picked up in Florida, trying to coach a new woman through the gift bag routine. He traded information for air. The picture sharpened a pipeline that looked like romance until it looked like prison. Safia called to say she'd spoken with another survivor who'd read a brief mention of our airport's major seizure and reached out. "Your sister's not just a case," Safia said. "She's a landmark. No one wants to be a landmark, but sometimes the map needs one." Elena's voice steadied on our weekly calls from the new facility. She started using words I recognized as hers, funny sideways, a little profane. She told me about a group session where she'd explained to a 19-year-old that trust isn't proven by shutting up. "It felt like borrowing a spine," she said, a tiny laugh threading the line. And then I realized it was mine. The change of plea hearing fell on a cool morning that smelled faintly of rain. In the courtroom, Elena stood head high and answered the judge's questions in a voice that didn't wobble. "Do you understand the rights you're waiving?" "Yes." "Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty of this lesser count as described?" "Yes." The word landed like a key in a lock, hard to say, necessary to turn. Pearson summarized the cooperation and the evidence of coercion. Alistair spoke about the program she'd been transferred to, about Dr. Mercer's report about fingerprints that told a story Hans had always known. The judge said he would consider all of it at sentencing and set a date 6 weeks out. Outside clouds moved fast. We stood under the courthouse awning while Agent Cobb tucked a stray hair behind her ear and said, "This is as close to good as this process gets." "What happens to him?" I asked. "We keep looking," she said. "People make mistakes when they think they've survived you. On the drive back to the facility, Elena watched the city slide by like a film she'd seen before, but finally understood. I wrote something, she said, pulling a folded paper from her sweater pocket. For court. If they let me read it at sentencing. Can I see? She handed it over. Simple sentences, no adornment. I believed someone who taught me to ignore the part of my brain that said, run. I'm learning to hear that part again. I will never carry anything for him again, not even his excuses. We passed the exit for my neighborhood, then the one for a park we used to visit with cheap sandwiches and stubborn kites. When we reached the facility, Elena hugged me hard in the parking lot where visitors pretended not to watch each other cry. Next time, she said, bring me coffee from that place on 9th, the one with the chipped mugs. Done, I said. Black 2 sugars. Black 1, she corrected, smiling for real. I'm not the same person. That night, I dreamed of keys, not the tiny one from the pouch, but a set on a ring heavy enough to anchor a pocket. In the morning, my phone buzzed with an email from Alistair sentencing memos due next Friday. Safia texted to say she'd help coordinate letters from the advocacy group. Dr. Mercer asked if we wanted an addendum about Elena's progress since transfer. Pearson sent a single line, "See you in court." I stood at the sink with the window cracked and listened to the slow city. A bus sighing to a stop, a neighbor's laugh, a dog's nails skittering on tile. For months, every sound had been a siren. Now some of them were only sounds. We weren't done. The hardest courtroom day was still ahead, but the story had shifted from if to how, from whether Elena would be crushed to how we could build the softest landing the law could allow. I poured coffee into a chipped mug I didn't remember choosing and circled the sentencing date on the calendar. Part of me wanted to sleep until then. Most of me wanted to work. I opened a blank document and titled it, Letters, and began, Your Honor. Before this case, my sister laughed easily. The sentencing calendar printed our case number in 12-point font as if small type could shrink consequence. We filled a bench, Alistair beside me, Safia behind us with a folder of letters, Agent Cobb standing along the wall like an anchor disguised as a person. AUSA Pearson stacked exhibits with the ritual tidiness of someone who trusts order to hold. Elena rose when called. The sweater the facility allowed under her jumpsuit made her look more like herself and exactly like someone who had learned the price of believing the wrong voice. Pearson spoke first, the weight in the suitcase, the pattern of travel, the cooperation that had already generated leads. She acknowledged coercive control and tendered Dr. Mercer's report, the storage unit inventory, the fingerprints on the lock that were not Elena's. There is responsibility here, Pearson said, but also exploitation. Alistair kept his remarks spare. He described a young woman who was not looking to profit, but to be loved. A system that prefers binaries. The concrete help Elena had given names, dates, places that acted. He didn't ask the court to forget the crime. He asked it to remember the why. The judge paged through the memos, marked a line, and looked up. Ms. Hale, he said. Elena's new name, still unfamiliar on official tongues. Do you wish to speak? Elena unfolded the paper she'd written in the car. She didn't read it so much as place it into the room. I believed someone who taught me to ignore the part of my brain that said, run. I'm learning to hear that part again. I will never carry anything for him again, not even his excuses. Silence in court is never empty. It's pressure calculation, the math of consequence. The judge set the paper down, folded his hands, and delivered the shape of our future. 18 months in a residential treatment program with integrated mental health services. 3 years of supervised release. No contact with Mr. Ward or any known associates. Continued trauma counseling. Vocational programming. Time served credited. A sound left me relief with splinters. Elena closed her eyes, not in drama, but in maintenance, like a person bracing and then deciding not to fall. They transferred her that afternoon. The facility had gardens bordered by chain link and windows large enough to reflect weather. On Sundays, I brought coffee from 9th in a chipped mug the staff pretended not to notice. Black one, she said, and smiled because the joke had survived us. We did family sessions that were mostly boundary setting said out loud. I will help with paperwork. I will not justify your contact with anyone from before. Our mother called once furious, then not at all. The counselor said absence can be a boundary too. Elena started mentoring newer residence girls who still thought love means never asking a second question. She told the bus stop version of our story, If a gift comes with a script, it's not a gift. She slept through most nights, woke from the rest without drowning, and enrolled in 2 online classes the program offered. She got A's because she read like a person building a bridge while crossing it. I went back to part-time at work. The whispers dulled, then moved on to other topics, as whispers do. I found a therapist who let me say I was angry at a man we still hadn't caught, and at a system that required my sister to plead guilty to be believed. We made a list of things no one carries for anyone else. Bags blame outcomes. News traveled in careful increments. The recruiter in Florida pleaded, and his interviews filled gaps. Another alias of Damien's pinged against a motel registry in El Paso, then went quiet. Pearson kept the file open. Cobb called when there was something to call about and did not when there wasn't. "People make mistakes when they think they've survived you," she'd said. I repeated it like a charm whenever the not-knowing pressed too hard. We cleaned out Elena's old storage unit on a rainy Saturday, the 2 of us sorting our past like it was laundry keep, donate, discard. She dropped a necklace he'd given her into the discard box without ceremony. "It's just metal," she said, and meant it. The tiny key we'd found stayed with evidence. We left the unit lighter than we'd arrived. By the time day passes started, Elena walked like a person who trusted the ground. We bought secondhand plates for the apartment she would move into after graduation from the program and argued amiably over curtains. She deleted her old social accounts and started a new one with nobody on it but me and 3 women from group who understood why silence can be holiday. On the last Sunday before her transfer to community housing, we sat on a bench near the garden and watched a bee harass a sunflower far larger than its plan. "Do you ever go back to the airport in your head?" she asked. "Every day," I said. "But it ends differently now. Sometimes we hand the suitcase to the first officer we see. Sometimes we never go inside." She nodded. "Sometimes I don't meet him at all." "We don't control that edit," I said. "We control this one." A bus sighed at the curb. A guard waved. Elena stood, smoothed the sweater, and looked at me with eyes that had learned a new language. Next week, she said, "Bring a pen. I need to sign for classes before the deadline." "Black one?" I asked, lifting the empty mug. "Black one," she said, and hugged me so hard the chipped rim pressed a crescent into my palm. When people ask about the day at the terminal, I don't tell the story of dogs and guns anymore. I tell the one where a bag full of other people's fingerprints forced us to put our own names back where they belong. The worst day still happened. It also built the door we walk through now. We don't carry anything for him, not the weight, not the silence, not even the ending. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.